Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV, and today's show is on Pope Benedict and the priests loyal to him. And today we welcome Brother Alexis Bonello to the show to discuss this very important topic.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV. It's always a pleasure.
Okay. Can you give a quick summary of all the findings on how Pope Benedict is still the Pope?
Okay, so I will start by saying that I thought for 5 years that Benedict was the Pope. I had some questions about this or that, but I never looked at the issue. And if people brought it up, I dismissed it as an absurd idea. And until one day someone said, look at it, study the problem. And I saw immediately in 5 seconds that Benedict's still the Pope. And the reason for that is just simple this. Words have meaning. And if the law requires you to say one thing, you can't say another thing. You have to say the thing the law says you have to do. So in Canon 332, Section 2 of the Code of Canon Law of 1983, published by John Paul II, the Roman Pontiff, and that Code of Canon Law, which binds all Catholics of the Roman Rite and the entire Church regarding papal authority, and which is written in heaven, because Christ says, whatever you, Peter, bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. And that means whatever you, John Paul II, promulgate as law is bound also in heaven. That tells us when a pope resigns. And in that canon, which is only valid, the authoritative text is only the Latin text. It's not the English text. So if you go and read the English text after seeing this program, you won't understand squat, okay? But in the Latin text, it's required that the Pope says or signifies that he renounces his petrine munus. And munus is a very technical theologic canonical term for the duty he has received from Christ to govern the church in the name of Christ. Okay, it's the duty. A king gives you a duty and therefore you're charged to do it. Okay, and the Latin munus means the charge. Okay, it's not like a charge on your credit card. And it's not like the charge a cavalry does in battle. It's a charge, and so you've been charged to do it. You've been commanded, you've been given the duty, and that duty, from that duty comes authority, title, dignity, power. But Benedict didn't say that. He said, I renounce the ministry which you, the cardinals, entrusted to me. Well, that's something entirely different else. It doesn't come from Christ, and it's not the word charge, it's the word ministry, which is just service. So what is Benedict saying in the Latin? In the Latin, he's saying, I feel too old to execute well the charge. Therefore, I'm renouncing the ministry. Okay? So basically what he's saying is, I'm going to remain Pope, but I'm just not going to act anymore as Pope because I feel too old. Someone else needs to do that. But that's not how the cardinals read it. Okay? The cardinals obviously did not want him to be Pope. They wanted him to resign. The Deutsche Bank, okay, and SWIFT, two financial organizations that are closely associated with the Nazis, Gladio, the US financiers, Wall Street. They all put pressure on Benedict. They were shut down all the ATMs at the Vatican. They stopped all bank wires to the Vatican to get rid of him. And they wanted him out. But as soon as he resigned, all those problems went away. Oh, what a miracle that is. You know, you can't solve financial problems like that in just a day because you resign. So it was obviously political pressure. So if a pope says anything other than I resign the papacy and I resign my charge, he's still the pope. And here we get into the thing of, well, does he have to say those words or can he say something else? And that is a clever argument to try to get you to think that he can signify something else. Okay, no. In canon law, if canon law says a pope resigns when he renounces his munus, his charge, he has to signify he renounces his charge. And there's only one way to do that in Latin. You have to use the word munus. You can't say the word ministerium. And I've translated more than 9,000 pages of Latin. I'm one of the leading scholars on Latin translation in the whole world, published, okay? So, you know, people can argue with me, but, you know, I don't think the argument has any value. I'll be frank with it. But it's just common sense too. And here we get back to our Catholic faith. You know very well when you go to Mass, if the priest says, instead of this is my body, this is my blood at the time of consecration, then the consecration doesn't take place and that bread doesn't become Jesus and you don't adore that bread as Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
If the priest says, this is my athletic ability, it obviously doesn't become Jesus. He has to say, this is my body. He has to be quoting the words of Jesus. So the same thing with the Pope. The Pope has to say, I renounce my charge. I can't, if he says, I renounce the doing of my charge, if I renounce the execution of the duty I have, that's not the same thing, because you have to renounce the thing and not the action. And Benedict renounced the action and not the thing, just like in the Eucharist, if the priest says the wrong words, the consecration doesn't take place. Same thing with the Pope. If he signifies something else when he renounces, he does not renounce. So that's the simple argument. So he's still the Pope and always has been the Pope.
When someone learns of this amazing and shocking news, what steps can they take to return to being loyal to the true Holy Father?
It takes a simple, childlike faith that is founded on Christ, not the opinion of men, that doesn't desire to please clergy, cardinals, famous people, powerful people, or all the people you know, but is willing to stand up for the truth, just as you do for the Eucharist. When the priest says, this is my body, you believe it's God, and you don't care what anyone else says if they say it's not God, okay? Now, a lot of people don't believe in the Eucharist anymore because they don't believe in the meaning of words anymore. You know, they call themselves Catholics and they vote pro-abortion and push the agenda of Freemasonry. So you have to be a true Catholic where words have meaning, because God, the Word, became our Savior. Jesus Christ, that's his name as a man, but before he became incarnate, he's God the Word, he's the eternal Son of God. So our Savior is the Word of God. We have to be extremely loyal to the meaning of words. If not, we're simply not honest people. And if we're not honest people, we can't be Christians and we can't have faith, okay? And faith is what saves you, and faith has to do with words. It's not, I believe Jesus is God in a sense. No, you believe Jesus is God, period, okay? And the proper meaning of the word God and is, okay? So this is no joking matter. It's a serious matter. But the problem is we're living in a Masonic age where the Masons are very sneaky people. They control everything, or almost everything. You want to know how much they control? How many nations have bought into the COVID-19 hoax? I think only about 3 or 4 did not buy into it. So that shows you the Masonic control of the world. And when Benedict didn't resign, but appeared to have, they decided they're going to say he has resigned, and that's the narrative they stick to. And you have to use some common sense. If you don't believe the mainstream media when they make any claims, why should you believe Benedict's renounced because the mainstream media says he has? Okay? If you don't believe anything Bergoglio says because you know he's a devout Marxist and everything come out of his mouth is a blasphemy or a lie, why do you believe his supporters that say he's the Pope? Okay, so just use some common sense. Who totally is in love with Bergoglio? Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, all the lefties of the world, the leader of communist China, they all love him. So use your common sense. If they love him, how could he be the vicar of Christ? Did all these people all of a sudden become devout Catholics and now they're loyal to the vicar of Christ? No, come on, use your common sense. So you have to react with common sense. And if you're a common sense Catholic, you'll see this argument. And it's so simple, it's irrefutable, and it's never been refuted because it's just the facts of history.
How does someone respond to those many trad Catholics who has no ounce of Christian charity within them and calls someone a Benedictist or a separatist or something worse than a sedevacantist?
Okay, so the term Benedictist was promoted by Peter Skojak, who began his media career with support out of DC. So I'm convinced that he's a political operative, and so He even said that he started 1 Peter 5 because he saw people were separating from Bergoglio, and he was afraid of that. So
Mm-hmm.
the whole purpose of his apostolate is political. It's not Catholic, and he's a good shyster, and he's a good con artist. And when the final argument came out and proved that Benedict was Pope, he went on the warpath and started using this silly term, which means the exact opposite of what he says, because he's the one that believes that Benedict's not in the see anymore. So he's the Benevacantis. Those of us who say the Pope, Benedict's still the Pope, are Catholics. To call us by any name is merely an insult of a juvenile mind that can't think around 3 words, you know, Benedict is the Pope, you know.
Yeah. It's Steve Skoger.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
But there's others too who just won't admit to the truth of it. Taylor Marshall, he's an Anglican priest who became a Catholic a year after he was ordained and was immediately taken on the staff of Washington, D.C. diocese. Ask yourself questions about that. That diocese is one of the most corrupt left-wing Marxist dioceses in the country, most politically allied. And so why would you even listen to him about anything? He wasn't even born a Catholic. He wasn't raised a Catholic, and he didn't even study theology in a Catholic seminary. And he will not even approach this argument because it's too simple to get his highly intelligent mind around that if the Pope says, I renounce B, and the law says he must renounce A, that therefore he's still the Pope.
Mm-hmm.
But the trads who praised Benedict for having restored the Latin Mass are the worst traitors of all, because they should have shown themselves loyal to Benedict and said, look, he didn't use the right Latin word. All the trads go to the Latin Mass. They know if the priest says the wrong Latin word, there's something wrong with that Mass and they shouldn't praise it. So Benedict didn't say the right Latin word, so why on earth are they saying he did? They're being inconsistent. They've proved, the trads have all proved, except the ones that are loyal to Benedict, they've all proved that there's nothing traditional about them. They're actual modernists who believe that words have meanings, can change, as long as the mainstream media says they're supposed to change. And that's what they all believe, and that's modernism.
And Taylor Marshall is also making quite a few bucks off the error he put in his book, Infiltration. Again, he's saying munus means 2 different things, right?
Okay, so the word Latin munus has many meanings in classical Latin, okay? But in canon law, it only has one meaning, because in canon law, there is a canon about how to use words. It's called Canon 17, and it says, if you want to know what any word means, you look at all the passages of canon law, and it will you'll see what it means. And in canon law, munus always means the same thing. It always means charge, okay? Now, some people try to translate it as office, and they say, well, it doesn't always mean office. Well, that's because you're using the wrong translation, son. I'm sorry. That's not what it means.
Mm-hmm.
When you translate from Latin to English, you have to find the precise term that equals the Latin term. You can't take one that's kind of close. So people like Ryan Grant, who don't know enough Latin to translate a single sentence correctly in any of his works, at least the ones I've looked at, and who's even the publisher of one of his translations lamented to me in private that it was worthless. They don't know what they're talking about. The second of all is, why would you listen to laymen, okay, about this, who have not studied Latin law, have never studied in a pontifical institute, and don't know their Latin, okay? I don't know, you know, but Taylor Marshall's smart enough to see the problem. He just doesn't want to admit it because he's a big speaker in EWTN. He'll lose his book writing, signing deals, and it'll take a financial hit if he comes out in the truth. I think if the majority of the church was in favor of returning to Benedict, then Taylor Marshall would be leading the pack to return to Benedict. But you have to understand that until 1964 or 5, when the council ended, okay, the church has never permitted laymen to exercise an apostolate of preaching or catechizing. Never. It was forbidden. And why? If you're not willing to forsake a wife and family, money and prosperity and fame and fortune to follow Jesus Christ as a religious or as a priest, you cannot be trusted with fidelity and handing down the faith. You cannot. because you have not renounced the world or the flesh, and maybe not even the devil, okay, in a public way that's habitual, certain, and verifiable. And that's why they were never allowed to preach. And when you allow laymen to preach, you get the problem of the Protestant churches. They all go their own way and they all start pontificating and saying, follow me. And every single one of these people do it, whether they're laymen or lay women, okay? Whether they're running a newspaper, a radio pod show, or anything like that. I don't know what they're doing or why they're doing it, because there's a lot of good priests who could get support in their ministry if their podcasts, blog sites, newspapers were read. But they don't get a chance because they've already been cut out of the market by all these laymen. And so it's preventing a restoration of the faith. And one thing you see about all these laymen is they'll be the first ones to say the layman must save the church. Yes, the layman must save it. The laymen have never saved the church. It's always the clergy and the religious. Why? Because we have sacrificed everything for Christ, and you guys don't even have the integrity to give up the world, the flesh, and the devil in a heroic way. So don't lecture us about who's going to save the church. You are not leaders in the church, and you never will be leaders in the church, because Christ established the clergy to be leaders in the church, okay? And after seeing, I've been on social media since 91, okay? So I've seen a lot of it. And in my old age, maybe I'm getting a bit impatient, but we're seeing more and more lay people and less clergy. And we should really listen to the clergy. It's true, because of all the problems in the church and all the pressure on clergy, that few of them have the ability to exercise a public ministry without being harassed by the bishop. That is true. But there are a lot out there who would have a lot more reach if they had the support of laypersons. So if an apostolate is not being run by a clergy or religious, the money is probably all going to help him buy a big mansion. And I don't know the stories of all these people, but the ones I do know, they're quite well off, and they're not wanting, they're not poor people. I mean, there are exceptions like Frank Walker of Canon 212. I don't think he's wealthy at all. But there's others who, like Steve Skojek, who moved from a big house in Virginia that sold for like $500,000 to even a cushier pad in Scottsdale, Arizona. So where's all that money going, and why are they preaching the faith? Because if someone's preaching the faith to get wealthy, that's the sin of simony. It's a mortal sin to use the religion of Christ to get wealthy or to get powerful. That is a mortal sin, because you're using heavenly things for earthly goals. And you could preach the gospel 100% pure, but if you're doing it for worldly interest, that's simony, and you'll go to hell. And Christ on his last day said, I never knew you. And he warns the apostles of that in scripture. So if you want to preach Christ, and if you want to teach the faith, and if you want to be a true servant and warrior for Christ, become a priest or become a religious. First, don't start a YouTube channel and an apostolate and go out there and promote yourself like you're some. And there are those who claim to be crusaders of old. They put on personas of, on social media, they pretend to be a priest or religious or crusader or an old pope. Catholic integrity, guys. Show your real face, or don't pretend to be that which you're not. Okay, that's Catholic integrity. Every gentleman had that when I was a young man.
Yeah, see all these people pretend to be crusaders. I was like, I thought my grandfather, uncle, or cousin was dead. But he's a Twitter account now.
Yeah. So, but to get back to Benedict, you have to be a Catholic that follows the faith and the teaching. What is written in the Code of Canon Law in Latin is more authoritative than anything that all the Catholic laymen in the world and all the Catholic clergy in the world would ever say, because it's papal law and it's inscribed in heaven. And that is the Catholic faith. And if you don't believe that, you're going to hell, because Boniface VIII says you must be subject to the Roman pontiff. There is no salvation to those who are rebels against the authority of the Roman pontiff. So that on questions of who is Pope, canon law rules. It's not the opinion of Cardinal Burke or Archbishop Schneider or Cardinal Sarah or anyone you might admire as a conservative, okay? It's not, you know, Raymond Penn, it doesn't matter what any of those people say. It's what's written in canon law. And clearly canon law says in Canon 332, Section 2, if the Roman pontiff renounces his munus For validity, there is required, blah, blah, blah. But he never even did that. So don't talk to me about the validity of the act. He never even did the act. It's not a question whether he did the act validly or not. He didn't even do the act, okay? As you could say, is he a great runner? He hasn't even gotten out of the bed yet, okay? Let's not talk about whether he's a great runner or not, to use an analogy. So don't listen to talking heads about this. You'll go to hell. You'll go to hell.
What has the response of the clergy been to learning what took place that day when it appeared Pope Benedict resigned?
Okay. There never was a consensus because Bishop Gracida never believed the renunciation was valid from day one. Okay. And even Cardinal Ike said it was a joke when he first heard it. The Cardinal Pell of Australia said the Pope shouldn't do this. And so 3 members of the hierarchy were opposed from it from the very first days. Gracida never wavered. Gracida always doubted that it was valid. Now Archbishop Langer came out in the wintertime and he says it's invalid. And a whole number of clergy in recent years have come out and said it's invalid, one way or the other, and different ones. I think Father Gruner was the first priest I know by name who said it was definitely invalid. A canonist in Italy, although he's backtracked on what he said, he was the first to say canonically it didn't do what is said in the law. And other priests have come out since then. So there never was unanimity. The argument invented by Skojec that you have to have absolute, the fact that the Catholic world accepted it means it's valid, is the most absurd piece of jackass theology I've ever heard. It's like saying, if you can hoodwink everyone, then it's not a crime. And that's Masonic. That's not Catholic. Okay, so, you know, be Catholic, don't be Freemasons.
How many priests have contacted you or let you know they are faithful to Pope Benedict?
Okay, so I don't want to answer that directly for the sake of their personal security, but I know of, there are priests who have publicly declared themselves, like Don Alessandro Minutella of Palermo, Don Enrico Ancali of Treviso. These are in Italy. Don Enrico Bernascone of Puglia, Don Francesco di Erasmo in Tarquinia. Those are 4 publicly known priests in Italy. Then there's Father Walter Covens in the Caribbean, and Father Kramer in the United States. And then there's a priest in Colombia and a priest in Ecuador who have publicly declared. I ask pardon that I don't remember their names off the top of my head. But I've also recently come to know more than 20 other priests who have revealed that they are in communion with Pope Benedict and pray only for him in the canon of the Mass, although I am not at liberty to name them in public. But there's a lot more. I know of one institute where all the priests believe that Benedict's the Pope. They're not entirely consistent in their public masses. They will name Pope Francis, but in their private masses, they name Pope Benedict. And that's hundreds of priests. So we're not talking about small numbers here. I kind of think that around the world, there's probably more than 10,000 priests who actually believe that Benedict's the Pope. They just don't yet have the courage to come out. They're waiting for, I guess, the complete disintegration of the Bergoglian pontificate because he keeps undermining himself, or maybe they're waiting for him to drop dead. But the reality just can't deny it, because just as if a priest said, this is my athletic ability, it's not a consecration. So a pope doesn't cease to be pope unless he says, I renounce my munus, or my charge, or the duty I've received from Christ. He can't say I've renounced the ministry entrusted to me by the cardinals. You know, wrong channel, wrong item, wrong program.
We had a few responses from high-ranking people on this, and I heard one response. He shared it with me, and I was like, "Yeah, how has there those angry responses been?"
There's a lot of anger responses out there, but none of the people who have been publicly asked have spoken correctly. Brandmüller used a phrase from Roman law in the exact opposite, contrary sense to hide what he was trying to hide. He wrote a whole academic paper on the renunciation. He never talked once about Munis. Burke holds people to be extremists if they doubt that Bergoglio is the Pope. Cardinal Sarah thinks that the Pope is the personal representative of the Church, even though the Catechism says he's the representative of Christ. So Sarah, they all get it wrong, because these men know the truth, and they can't in conscience really utter a direct fat-out lie. They try to hide it in some way, and you can uncover what they said. Burke very cleverly tried to deflect the argument by saying, I think it would be very difficult to demonstrate that Benedict did not intend to resign. But Burke knows well that Canon 332 has nothing to do with what the Pope Benedict intended to do. It's about what he did. Okay, so Burke is a very clever liar. They're all involved in it. They all wanted Benedict to go away, and I think that's because Benedict was cleaning up the finances, the slush funds at the Vatican, and he was cleaning up the pedophile networks. And if he was allowed to remain in power, he would have caught all of them red-handed. That's my opinion, because honest men don't act like this way. Honest man will say, hey, he didn't say Munis, he said Ministerium, therefore he's still Pope. Because if you're loyal to the Pope and he makes a mistake in a document, you rush right to the Vatican, you say it's a mistake. Either correct it or it doesn't take effect. You don't remain silent and then start making up arguments for 7 years.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's not loyalty. Okay, so none of these people are loyal to the Pope. They were never, none of the bishops were loyal to the Pope, and none of the cardinals. And that's the problem right we're now in. We're in an age where the clergy have apostatized from Christ. They've shut the churches, they've put on masks, and they won't allow you to receive the sacraments, not even baptism for your children, because they're afraid of COVID-19, which doesn't even threaten anyone. Okay, so they're apostasy. They've accepted a false, fake religion based on a mythical disease, and they've given up on the revelation from God and their sacred ministry. They've given up. But as hypocrites, because they say Benedict resigned the ministry, therefore he's not Pope. But they themselves have renounced the ministry, but they claim they still have power in the church.
Mm-hmm.
See, it's ministry for me, but not for thee. You know, it's you've resigned, but not me. See how it's absolutely two-faced. They're acting like complete Democrats, as you would say in the United States, or complete lefties. Okay,
Yeah.
not as men of faith. And I know some of the best of them, and they will not question that Bergoglio is the Pope, not for anything, because they'll say, oh, I'll lose my pension. I'll lose my money. People might think bad of me. God won't help me. They don't even believe there is a God in heaven who will protect people. I mean, I'm a Franciscan. For more than 20 years, I lived without a penny. Did I worry about God's not going to help me? No, I knew he would promise to help me, because he's the one that said, give up everything for me and I'll help you. I believe that. If you don't believe that, what are you doing as a priest?
Mm-hmm. And there was one who threatened you.
Threaten me. Remind me.
Gang swine.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So in December of last year, I wrote Archbishop Ganswein asking to arrange a meeting with the Pope. And while I was sick in bed with, I think it was COVID-19, and he called me up and he threatened me over the phone using a burner phone. And I have the recording of it. I have the recording of his phone call. I can't in Italian law ever play it back, but if anyone ever visits me in private, I can let you hear it. And it's his voice. He's threatening me just like a gangster. And he's telling me to stop my investigation, stop spreading what I'm spreading.
Mm-hmm.
You must pray for Pope Francis. He's the Pope. Yeah. Then it came out that he was an agent of Bergoglio all along, editing everything Benedict allegedly said. We can't be in doubt that anything that's come out in the last 7 years claiming to be from Benedict is actually from Benedict. And personally, I'll add that I'm highly suspect of what Benedict even did on the 11th of February 2013, because when you look at what he said that day in video, you see that he's kind of, foggy in his actions. But you watch him 3 days later, when he's speaking to the priests of the diocese, he's perfectly clear and lucid. So at 11:30 in the morning, when he read the document that is alleged to be his renunciation, why is he not clear of mind? I think that he might have been drugged to read that document. I honestly think that. And I think that Ganswein knows who put the drugs in his food. And I think his name isn't much different from the name I just said. But I can't prove that. I just can only suspect it. but there's that much level of deceit out there in the Vatican. And it's now come out that Ganswein has blocked letters denouncing pedophile priests so that Benedict wouldn't see them. So we know what side Ganswein's on.
Yeah, I know he blocked a letter. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tell AJ, you have personal experience with this. So what did you do last fall, and what did you discover?
Well, it was right after Thanksgiving. I was like, well, I better get a letter to Pope Benedict like usual off for Christmas. So I knew how long it would take. So right after Thanksgiving, as usual, I write up a nice Christmas card for him. I asked you how to address it properly so it get to him. I also had to put Archbishop Gangswain, personal secretary of Pope Benedict, but on the inside envelope, for eyes only of Pope Benedict the 16th. And who wrote me back on his personal stationery? Archbishop Gangswain.
And you showed me a picture of that letter, and I think I published it from Rome. I think I did.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I found strange was he replied to your Christmas card as if you had written to him and not to the Pope.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as Ganswein is concerned, in Ganswein's mind, Benedict doesn't exist. He is Benedict. So if you write the Pope, he writes you back. And it was a bizarre letter. But that shows you the level of mania around Pope Benedict. And so you should doubt that when anyone says Pope Benedict had said anything, that it's really coming from Benedict, because Ganswein, in his letter to you, AJ, has demonstrated that he thinks he is Benedict. Okay.
Yeah.
So Benedict might have been drugged for 7 years. He might actually be a prisoner in the Vatican on psychotic drugs, so that they just wiped out his mind to get him out of the Vatican. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that might explain why the actual act of the Renunciation has more than 40 errors in the Latin, because Benedict was good in his Latin. He didn't write sloppy Latin. But I imagine that Ganswein doesn't know his Latin well, and maybe he wrote that.
And what really was surprising, it usually takes about a month to get a letter back. But it happened darn near a week or so. In about a week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so before Christmas, Ganswein, as the private secretary of Pope Benedict, should be handling all kinds of meetings and visits with friends and dear ones and cardinals who want to talk to the Pope. He shouldn't have time to respond to every letter he gets. In it, and he signed this one. It was his signature.
Mm-hmm.
So he evidently, you know, his act playing Benedict the 16th is very important to him, and he devotes all his time to it.
And in the Christmas card, I wanted Pope Benedict to speak up because all the craziness going on, the idols in the garden, and I put it in a letter inside the Christmas card. I asked him to speak up.
And what happened to your letter?
Don't know.
I think Ganswein probably picked it up, opened it up, and threw it in the garbage. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if Benedict's not a prisoner, why is he being controlled? And why does he have a secretary that acts like that? There's really no explanation. There's none. Mm-hmm. So, but even Ganswein in 2016, when he still had on his own personal shield his crest and that of Benedict, he subsequently changed it to put Bergoglio's coat of arms on there. In 2016 at the Gregorian, he said out of his own mouth that Benedict is still sharing the Petrine office and the Petrine ministry. Okay, so if Ganswein, who's such an ally of Bergoglio, still says that Benedict's the Pope, and then you look at the other facts, maybe, I don't know, I don't want to anticipate one of your questions, but there's a lot of facts that shows that Benedict knows he's still the Pope. Mm-hmm. So.
What does it mean to be faithful to Pope Benedict?
Okay, so fidelity to the Pope means that when he does something right and honest, you obey him. And when he does something that has an error in it, you discover the error and bring it to his attention. So it might be corrected and he may not lose face before the world, even if it's such a small error as an error of punctuation in what he wrote, but especially if it's the wrong word. And if he decrees something that he doesn't have the authority to decree, or he decrees it in such a manner as it doesn't have effect, you bring it to his attention, whether you like his decree or not, because that's loyalty to the Pope. But if he goes through the actions of renouncing the papacy and he never renounces it because he didn't do even that which canon law says he should do, you should obviously bring it to his attention. You don't go along with the make-believe that he's resigned. So that's what's loyal to the Pope. And you should be willing to risk your life, your reputation, and your good name, and all your riches, wealth, and your career to be loyal to the Pope in the way I just said.
Mm-hmm.
If not, you're not loyal to the Pope.
What has happened to these priests who are now faithful to Pope Benedict, and are their punishments valid?
Okay, so nearly none of them have been punished, because what are you going to punish them for? Okay, you can't punish them from doing what is right, and most bishops know this, even though they're going through the fakery of following Bergoglio. They won't punish these priests. Only two, to my knowledge, have been punished, and one is Don Minutella, and I would say they tried to punish him because his bishop, the Archbishop of Palermo, was appointed by Bergoglio and therefore is not the real Archbishop of Palermo and has no authority to do anything, excommunicated him simply because he said, are you loyal to the Pope? He says, I'm loyal to the Pope. And they said, I'm going to excommunicate you because you didn't say I'm loyal to Pope Francis. You said I'm loyal to the Pope. I mean, that's not even canonically valid, even if you did have authority. And then recently, Father Leatherby in California, who was excommunicated because he names Benedict in the canon of the Mass.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't be excommunicated for naming a Pope in the canon of the Mass. Imagine if there's some elderly priest somewhere and he doesn't know, he's been in the darkest bushes of Africa and he doesn't know who's been elected in the last 30 years and he keeps naming Paul VI. Can you excommunicate him? Certainly not, because it's only a question of knowledge of who is Pope. It's not a question of being in or out of communion of the church. So the excommunication of Father Leatherby by Bishop Soto of Sacramento is completely invalid and it's utterly laughable.
Why are these bishops so rash in dishing out quick excommunications against these priests, and not sit down, talk to them, go through the evidence to learn why they believe the way they do?
It's the same reason why if you're in a political protest against gay marriage and you run into advocates of gay marriage, that they're just going to go on the attack because they know the truth already. They can only have to open their diapers up and they can see what gender they are, okay? And they can figure out very easily what they're supposed to do with that part of the body. If they deny the most manifest things of nature or the facts of history and reality, then they can only attack. They can't discuss it because they don't want to get involved in creating a completely fraudulent or fake argument in which they would ultimately lose. He who defends a lie will lose the argument, so he doesn't want to argue.
I'm the devil's advocate. So, Pope Benedict is still the Pope. Are those who were selected to become bishops by Jorge Cardinal Bergoglio as Pope Francis, are they bishops, and are those made cardinal by him actually cardinals?
Okay, so his nomination of them has no force of law, and their acceptance of his nomination as bishops, they commit the canonical penalty of episcopal consecration without pontifical mandate, which is the crime of Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, and so they're excommunicated like him. If you think Lefebvre was excommunicated, then you must hold that these bishops are also excommunicated. However, did they all know, or were they just going along? Because there's three things we have to consider in what's going on. There's those who know Bergoglio is not the Pope and went along with him getting elected, even though the conclave was invalid. You can't elect a Pope while a Pope is still alive. Those people are formally morally and canonically guilty of schism and are no longer in communion with the church. Okay, formally, morally, canonically. There's three different criteria. Formally is, in actual fact, in the sight of God, they're schismatics because they're not in communion with the true Pope. Morally is, they're responsible for that as a sin because they knew the truth and chose the lie. And then canonically is, they are culpable in law for the crime because they did so out of bad will, okay? Not just out of light ignorance or sloth. Okay, so for 5 years, I thought Benedict was the Pope. I mean, Benedict was no longer the Pope. Theologically, I was in schism from Christ and his church. But there was no moral fault because I never examined it and I was canonically opposite. But the more people asked me to do it, the more I saw that I'm obliged to investigate because I can't excuse the argument. I'd be morally culpable.
Mhm.
And once I investigated, then I saw in 5 seconds that Benedict's still the Pope because I had no bad will in it, okay? And I had the knowledge to see it. I just, out of not even bothering to look at it, didn't know. And so, yes, those in communion with Pope Francis are all in schism from Christ, and they're not a part of the Church of Christ. All of them, all the bishops, all the priests, and all the clergy. But most of them don't know it because they weren't involved in the conspiracy and they accepted the lies thinking they're truth. So most of them are not morally culpable or canonically responsible. Only Bergoglio and his small clique and the cardinals who should have known, like Burke, they're all canonically responsible. Because if you have a doctrine in canon law, you can't say you're ignorant of these things, okay? And people have asked you many times and you've always refused, so you've shown malice of a forethought and consent to the conspiracy. But many clergy, though they say Pope Francis in the canon, they don't know the Latin, they don't know the canon law, and they never examined it. And they never even been asked to examine it, so they have no moral capability. Those who have been asked and refused to do it out of sloth or some excuse, the culpability increases every time they're asked and they refuse. But they're not guilty of the canonical crime. To be guilty of the canonical crime, you actually have to choose to follow someone you know is not the Pope as the Pope, then you're in schism. And that's only a small group of clergy and bishops, in my opinion. So yes, there is a schism in the church. It began on February 28th, and it envelops a great number of clergy who are more responsible than laity who don't have the training to even understand the problem. But God is tolerating because he sees that most people aren't responsible. Okay, so this is the facts. Okay, the fact of whether the Pope did validly resign or not is what you call a historical fact. It could be called also a dogmatic fact, but God has given us the natural reason to know whether the moon is made of cheese or not. If the whole church should start believing the moon was made of cheese, God's not going to destroy the church for that because you just say, well, these are just humans, they're ignorant, okay?
Mhm.
And they'll figure it out. God the Father gave them the stuff, so God the Son's going to be patient in judging them. They'll figure it out. So likewise with this era, it will eventually be known, and the whole church will accept Benedict has always been the Pope. But in the meantime, Catholics have to be people of integrity and stand for the truth no matter what people say. You should be able, I mean, God's giving you every chance to figure this one out, okay? Bergoglio is not a St. Pius X who's working miracles left and right and is the holiest person and the most Catholic guy who's ever been on the papacy. He's quite the contrary. He denies he's vicar of Christ. He calls Benedict the Pope. He did that at the Panama Youth Conference. In the recent Pontific Annuario, the official yearbook of the Vatican, he took all the titles from the papacy and he didn't put them under him, above him. He put them below him as if they're not important. He doesn't like people kissing his hand as the Pope. He makes sure that he shows all his cardinals to Benedict, I guess wanting his approval, knowing that because he knows Benedict's the Pope. He knows his election's invalid. That's why he moved into Santa Marta and made that his headquarters, because that's where the cardinals are supposed to stay in the conclave, and he doesn't want a conclave to be called while he's alive. He wants that power to himself. He makes people to resign, like the head of Vatican Police, and in the resignation declare that he's successor Peter, which is not a thing to do in a resignation. So people are doubting it, even in the Vatican. While at the same time, Benedict has everything that Benedict has done is said he's the Pope. He keeps wearing white, which only the Pope does. He even wore the mantle for a long time, knowing the Pope. He didn't leave the Vatican, go back to Veria. He went to Castel Gandolfo, which is the residence of the Pope. He signs his name, Benedict the 16th, PP, Pastor of Pastors, which only a Pope can do. And when Bergoglio signs, he just writes Pope Francis, Bishop of Rome. He doesn't write Pastor of Pastors. So Bergoglio knows he's not the Pope. Benedict knows he is the Pope. Benedict doesn't wear the papal ring anymore, although for a while he wore it in a broken form. But he gives the apostolic blessing like the Pope, Benedict. And many times Bergoglio won't even give the apostolic blessing. And so, you know, they're both telling you the truth. Listen. But people prefer to listen to the cardinals and bishops. And why are the cardinals, bishops, and clergy telling you to follow a false man as Pope? Because their reputation will be completely destroyed the day they're forced to admit to the whole world they got it wrong. Who's going to go to Mass any longer if your priest doesn't even know who the Pope is, if he could have known who the Pope is, and if he lied to you for 7 years about who the Pope is? Who would go to Mass anymore with clergy like that? That's why they're continuing to lie to you, because they'll know they're going to lose everything, their immortal souls and all their faithful parishioners. They need the integrity to come out like these priests have been persecuted, many of them, and say, no, Benedict's the Pope. I was fooled. I was negligent. I didn't realize it. And I've only lately figured it out. And we should be merciful to those priests. And we should be merciful to all these other priests. If they're going to repent, we should take them back and forgive them. But they got to repent. They're leading souls astray. You know how many families have been destroyed by Bergoglio because he said you can get divorced and live with your new girlfriend or new boyfriend? Tens of millions have been destroyed because they said, well, the Pope said it, I can do it.
Yeah. Are these excommunications valid? And when the laity learn about the evidence and see everything, will these same type of punishments be valid on us?
No, these excommunications are not valid. Why? First of all, if you're in communion with someone who's not the Pope, you have no authority to excommunicate anyone. Second, if you were appointed by someone who's not the Pope, you have no authority to excommunicate anyone. And third, you can't excommunicate anyone for doing what is right. Can you imagine if the bishop excommunicated you because you were pro-life? Would that excommunication be valid? No, it wouldn't. So don't even call it an excommunication, or call it like a, you know, a boomerang kind of thing. Bishops who do these things show that they are intentionally schismatic, and they've actually only excommunicated themselves.
Anything else you'd like to add?
We have to have integrity and be Catholic. We have to follow the teaching of the church, not talking heads, not cardinals, not bishops, not priests, not your confessor, not your religious superior. Your loyalty is to Jesus Christ and the teaching of and laws of the church. That's the Catholic faith. If your faith doesn't rise to that level, you don't have the Catholic faith and you can't be saved. I don't care if you go to 27 Latin masses a day and do all the rubrics perfect. You don't have faith, because your God must be Jesus Christ, who said, whatsoever you bound on earth shall be bound in heaven. So Canon 332 that says, if the Roman Pontiff renounces his munus, that is written in heaven and bound in heaven, and in the hour of your death, Christ's going to ask you whether you accept it or not. And if you say, no, Bergoglio is the Pope, you're going to go to hell, okay? If you had a chance to examine this, and if you heard this video, now you have a chance to examine it, so you no longer have an excuse. You got to accept Benedict as the Pope, or you're going to hell, okay? It's just as simple as that. Just as if someone went to a Mass, and the priest said, this is my athletic ability, and this is the sweat off my back and the chalice of your salvation, and you receive those as Christ, you would go to hell for adoring bread and wine as if it was the body and blood of Jesus Christ, because the priest didn't say the right words. And Benedict also did not say the right words. So in the case of Benedict, since he didn't say the right words to stop being Pope, he's still the Pope. In the case of a bad consecration, since the priest didn't say the right words, the bread and wine were not transformed in the body and blood of Christ.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. That's simple Catholic faith. If you can't handle that, that's above your pay grade, then you have don't have the Catholic faith, you never were Catholic. And if any talking head is telling you the contrary of what I have just said, he is a servant of Satan. He is a deceiver of Lucifer. He is a fallen angel. He is an agent of Freemasonry. He is a deceiver, a liar, a fraud, and a dishonorable piece of trash. And don't waste your time listening to another video that the guy puts out, okay, or the girl puts out.
Mm-hmm. Tomorrow's show, folks, will be 2 parts. And it will be jam-packed full of information. It will be the lead up to the miracle on the Vistula River, where the newly reformed Polish country and newly reformed Polish army defeats Lenin, Trotsky, and all the Bolsheviks in a battle with the help of Our Lady, but Our Lady was not seen by the Polish.
And we'll explain perhaps why that is. So that took place 100 years ago on the feast of Our Lady's Assumption in just 3 days now.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to talk about this in Order Militaris. We're about Catholics defending their rights. And the fact that Our Lady appeared and defended the Catholic nation of Poland as soon as it sprung into being shows how much she loves the Polish people and how much she defends Catholics when they do what they right. Even if sometimes their commanders are absolute rogues, she will defend Catholics. And she's an enemy of Bolshevism and Marxism. And this also confirms that she's an enemy of Bergoglio and all his Marxist friends.
Mm-hmm.
And that she'll fight with us if we take up arms to fight.
Yep. So tune in tomorrow. Please share this show, like it, subscribe to our channels on BitChute, YouTube. Thank you for the new followers on Mixcloud. Keep growing. Please share our shows there. Yeah.
And if you have not yet made a donation to the Beirut Humanitarian Relief Fund, which is a mission of our order, please do so, okay? I want to thank the 4 individuals that each donated $1,000, and then about 12 others that each donated 100, 200, or 300. And so there's no one coming to the help of these Catholics, and social media platforms are banning all the Catholic appeals. You're only hearing appeals from Masonic or non-Catholic organizations. So it's very important that we help save the Catholics of Beirut. Beirut's a Catholic city.
Mm-hmm.
About half the population is Catholic. It's one of the rare parts of Lebanon that is. So these are not Muslims, they're Catholics. And so we need to help them.
Yeah.
Thank you. If you've already made a donation, I thank you on behalf of all the people of Lebanon.
Yep. The link for the relief fund will be in the description, in the comments, and please, 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 please donate. Please support it. Please promote it wherever you have social media, because Twitter and a few others are up to their old censorship tricks again. Until tomorrow. Yep.
Until tomorrow, I just want to add, I want to thank Frank Walker of Canon 212 for taking an ad for the Beirut Relief Fund. But if there's anyone out there who would help us pay for that ad, it costs $400, and that's money we don't have. So if anyone would like to donate $400 to pay for that ad, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Until tomorrow, when we learn about how Poland became a country once again, thanks to this Polish writer. We'll see you tomorrow.
It's going to be a great show, so tune in.
Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.